Millions.
Hundreds?
I don't have idea, but I think it's a lot of people.
Probably about 400,000.
Probably 200,000.
Oh, golly. I think it's maybe around 35,000 these days, something like that.
Drunk driving or impaired driving.
Texting and driving.
Inattention.
Distractions. Alcohol.
Alcohol. Alcohol related for sure. I think it's eye-opening after moving and living in Las Vegas for the past year, how many fatalities and crashes I've seen personally due to alcohol related.
I'd say not paying attention to other people on the road.
Go driving, driving test.
People are irresponsible in driving. They don't pay attention. They have distractions from like cell phones, put makeup on, to just eating. See, I'm a full-time pedestrian, so because I'm legally blind. So I've almost got hit several times just in the crosswalk just because people are not paying attention when they turn right.
Speeding, no seatbelts, things like that.
I've heard drunken driving and then fatigue are the two big ones, perhaps.
Someday in the future, probably.
No, not going to happen.
No, not at all. I don't think it's realistic. But I do think that if we work towards reaching that goal, that we will decrease the amount of fatalities.
Absolutely not. This is humanity.
No.
No, not with as many cars and not with, the amount of people here.
Yeah, if people stop using their phones while they're driving.
It's not incredibly likely, but it's always good to strive for perfection.
If we can get it under 1,000, that would be cool.
I would say we could at least cut it in half of what it is now.
I have no idea. 2.
If the number was down to 10, I think that'd be good.
Acceptable would be anything lower than what it is now.
Say maybe 1,000.
I think our goal for fatalities needs to be brought down at least 50% in the next couple of years.
10.
10?
Under 5,000.
Like under 100.
Less than we have now, I suppose.
Okay. Zero?
Zero.
Well, you'd have to say zero for that.
For my family, personally, zero. That's acceptable for my family.
0.
None.
Zero.
0.
0.
Zero.
None.
Zero.
0.
None.
Oh, obviously we'd hope for zero.
Zero? Okay.
Yeah.
0.
0. You leave the house, you come back to it at the end of the day, I feel like.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. That'd be great.
Yes.
It should be, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Definitely. Great.
Yes. I think there should be 0.
I mean, yeah, you have to aim high, I would say.
It should be 0.
That should definitely be the goal. I absolutely agree, yes. That should be the goal, 0 fatalities.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I think Mike could probably help me with this. I believe the state, and it's been a while since at least a couple weeks since I read the state safety plan. Excuse me. I believe that is a 0 also, is it not? So when we do ours, could somebody flip that light back on for me, please? Thank you. Keep going. There you go. When we do ours, of course, everybody disagrees with me, but I like that 0 number personally. I'm an optimist. I do like to dream, but it's mine. Hi, some of you don't know who I am. I'm Jean Knight. I'm the manager of the Lake Havasu Metropolitan Planning Organization, aka MPO. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate that. The MPO was really established in 2013. The governor signed her letter in March. I moved here almost 2 years ago to help get this up and running, and it's been a lot of work and a lot of fun. And we have 2 studies going on, so for some of you who are a tad confused, it's okay. It's important that you're at both of them because your input is greatly needed and wanted. Whether it's about the safety factors, because we are working on our safety plan, going to check my notes here, as well as our regional transportation plan. Regional transportation plan will tap into safety a tad. but not to the extent of what we're doing with our safety plan. The reason that we want to develop a safety plan is because we want to have 0 fatalities and 0 injury crashes. But it's multimodal. I really don't need my notes. It's multimodal in that it's pedestrian, bicycles, skateboarders, anybody that's on the road, and a vehicle. Of course, all of those, that's what we talk multimodal. So we want to, the safety plan will address and assist in planning projects. We plan, projects are the city and the county, to where there's a safety factor, a component in everything that we develop that's multimodal. So that's just a little brief. What I'd like to do is to introduce Mike Blankenship. He is with AMAC Foster Wheeler. He's our consultant and project manager on this project. And I'm going to let him take it from there and introduce his team.
Thank you, Jean. And I echo welcoming all of you and thanking you for coming out and participating and giving us some greatly needed feedback on safety in the Lake Havasu area. I'm leading the project from the consultant end with AMAC Foster Wheeler in Phoenix, and Brian Fellows is also with AMAC in the back, and he'll be up here manning the crash maps with me during the informal part of this presentation. Dell Miller is on our team from Rick Engineering, Theresa Gunn from GCI, and actually I'll let Theresa introduce a couple of her team members and then move forward with the next slide.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I think most of you met Ashley and Albert out front as you came in, and they're helping you take care of you today. And glad you're here, and hope you'll take advantage of all of the different activities that we have around the room for you to participate in. We want to start out just doing a quick survey. How many crashes do you think happen in Lake Havasu every year? Anybody have a guess? Take a guess. 500? Sounds good. 500 sounds good. Anybody else? 1,000? 1,000? 50? 100? 100? 1,300? Okay. So how many people die from those crashes? 35? 5? 10? Any other numbers? What is the acceptable number of fatalities? 0? Is that realistic, do you think? No? You're saying no? See some other heads? No? Well, what we want to do tonight is, or this afternoon, is to share with you a little more of the information that Michael and his team has pulled from the actual crash reports for Lake Havasu. And then we're going to talk about some potential strategies that are done in other locations, and really want your help in identifying those that are going to work, you think, the best in Lake Havasu. And then, of course, we have the wall where you can make a commitment what you're willing to do to help get to 0 or get closer to that 0 goal of no fatalities. So with that, Mike, do you want to come over and go through, and here's...
Okay, so the first guess of about 500 a year was pretty close. So the data we pulled, and this is crashes that were actually reported to ADOT, to the Arizona Department of Transportation. So technically this isn't all the crashes that occurred in the Lake Havasu region, it's just all of the reported crashes. And research has shown that about 30% of crashes go unreported. But these are the reported crashes over 10 years through December of 2014. Just under 6,300 crashes over the 10-year period, so about 630 crashes a year. 30 fatal crashes over that 10-year period, so about 3 fatal crashes a year. And of those 30 fatal crashes, 32 people actually died. And I want you to keep in mind, and we stress this every time we start throwing numbers and statistics up, they're not just numbers. Those are 32 people over the last 10 years in Lake Havasu that were killed. So their family members lost a loved one. Our law enforcement had to go and knock on doors and make a call that they never want to have to make. Co-workers are affected, other family members. These are real people's lives that we're talking about here, not just statistics. In terms of out of those 6,300 or so crashes, what is the percentage by crash type? And the most frequent are rear end crashes here in this region. Just over a quarter of the crashes are rear end. So those are typically our lower severity, people not paying attention. Somebody stops at a stop sign or a red light and the person behind them not paying attention, they run into them. The next highest are single vehicle crashes, and these typically are severe types of crashes. This is somebody running off the road and either rolling over, and if they're not wearing a seatbelt, many times being thrown out of the vehicle, or they run off the road and they hit something, a post, a utility pole, a wall, whatever it might be. Then 21% are angle crashes, right angle crashes, and this is what you'll see if somebody runs a red light and gets hit kind of in a T-bone, or at your stop sign, stop controlled intersection, somebody pulls out in front of somebody on the perpendicular street. And then the bottom two there in terms of frequency, side swipe, same direction. So maybe on 95 on the highway where you've got multiple lanes. There are two lanes going in the same direction and somebody moves over in front of somebody else and they kind of side swipe each other. And then left turn crashes, which is actually pretty low. Typically, especially at signalized intersections, we see maybe 25 to 30% of signalized intersection crashes or left turn crashes. And from what I can see in town here, I don't know if all the signals are like that, but most of them actually have what we call protected only left turn phasing. So that when you make your left turn, you don't have oncoming traffic that you have to compete with and look for a gap before you can make your left turn. You get the left turn arrow. Now, in terms of the fatal crashes, the percentage by crash type for fatals, it shows something different. 40% of the fatal crashes here in the last 10 years were pedestrians and bicyclists getting hit and killed. So 12 of those 30 crashes, 30 fatal crashes, were pedestrians. 10 pedestrians, 2 bicyclists. And that doesn't include any crashes that occurred this year. And I know you had the tragedy with 2 bicyclists this year that were killed. Single vehicle, again, a pretty high severity level in terms of the fatals. 23% of those fatals are single vehicle, 13% head-on. So head-ons happen very rarely, but when they happen, they're pretty severe. Feel free to jump in with questions or comments as I'm going through this. Might be going a little fast here. Don't want to confuse anybody. Question? Wait, we need to get you on the mic because we are being recorded. So watch what you say.
Is this these statistics just within Lake Havasu?
Good question. Good question. It is within the Lake Havasu MPO boundary, which extends just outside of the city boundary for Lake Havasu City. So it includes a little bit of Mojave County. But it's mostly, when you look at those, the 6,300 crashes, and I've got the statistic over there, I want to say 5,800 of these crashes were within the city boundaries. So most of it is within Lake Havasu City. Good question. Was there another question?
Yeah, like, well, back I was walking and I was going, I pushed the button to go across the thing and it has walk.
Yep. Just hold it up a little quick.
Okay. While I'm walking across, somebody goes right through a red light.
Yes.
So anybody in here is doing that, please stop it. Because that can cause accidents.
Red light running is very dangerous and hazardous, and we will be pulling those statistics too. I don't know that it was very high in the Lake Havasu area in terms of the fatal crashes, but it is definitely an issue.
Why is the impaired driving double in the town than it is in the state?
You're jumping ahead.
I can read, you know.
Why would that be? So now let me preface this. These are for the fatal crashes, and remember there were 30 fatal crashes here, and I'm not trying to downplay the fatal crashes, but that's a low number statistically. So, but you're right, that would be a key. As we're putting this strategic plan together, that would be one area that should be looked at closer and be an emphasis area is why do we have a higher incidence, basically double what we're seeing statewide in impaired drivers involved in fatal crashes. And that very well could be. So we may want to take a closer look at when are those 30 fatal crashes occurring? Are there a handful occurring during spring break? or during the kind of the winter season when you have out-of-towners here maybe more frequently with the snowbirds.
I was just wondering if the amount is increased, are those individuals from another state, or are they Arizona residents?
That is a very good question, and I do not know the answer to that, but we can find that. That's a good point, whether they're familiar drivers or unfamiliar drivers. Yep. Did somebody else have a hand up somewhere? So this slide, the next couple of slides, compares the fatal crash statistics here in Lake Havasu area with the state plan, or the state crash data that came out of the state safety plan. So you're pretty similar in several of these emphasis areas. With speeding, a little bit lower than the state, but pretty similar in the 30%. Impaired driving, definitely huge here. And that's not just, well, that is impaired driving, but we've also taken a closer look at the pedestrian. Remember I said there were 10 pedestrian fatalities, and that number is pretty similar. It was either 3 or 4. 30 or 40% of the pedestrians who were killed were also impaired. Distracted driving, around 17%. Pretty similar in terms of the seatbelt. And I will say this with the seatbelt issue, that's probably the cheapest, quickest, easiest way to drive down these fatal numbers if we're wanting to get to zero is people wearing their seatbelts. You wouldn't believe the number of crash reports that we read where there were multiple people in a vehicle. 2 of them walked away with not even a bruise because they were wearing seatbelts. 1 of them was killed because they didn't have a seatbelt on. They were tossed out of the car when they lost control and went off the road. Somebody, Dale had mentioned somebody, I think it was you young ladies, talking about, is there anything with ages? Was that? Age breakdown in terms of the older driver and the younger driver. So drivers older than 64 years of age, as you can see, are disproportionately involved in the fatal crashes here compared to statewide. Statewide, it's about 15% of the fatals involve the older driver. Here, it's about 30%. Now, that could be that you've got the population, the demographics here skew to a higher age range. So there's probably more older drivers here than statewide. That could be one reason. I'm not saying that the older drivers here drive less safe than older drivers in other parts of the state. Younger drivers, you're actually a little bit safer from the fatal crash standpoint. 23% of the fatal crashes involved younger drivers under the age of 25 versus 30% statewide. These last two, and we've already shown the numbers, but the last two really jump out. Pedestrian fatal crashes, 30% here, 15% statewide, double. Bicyclist fatalities, 6% versus 2%, triple the state average. You want me to, until we get to the box? Okay, the next few slides, what we've done is this is going to lead into a little fun exercise that Theresa is going to have you guys do in the back with the red solo cups. And if anybody wants to sing out while we're doing that, the Toby Keith song. What we've thrown up here are just some example over the next 4 or 5 slides, example strategies that have either worked in other locations around the country or in the state, have been included in other regional safety plans. These are examples. It doesn't mean they'll end up in this safety plan. It doesn't mean that there won't be a whole lot of other strategies that could end up in the safety plan, but it's mainly to get you thinking about some strategies to help address some of these emphasis areas that we just went through. And we try to break these down into what traffic engineers call the 4 E's of traffic safety: engineering, education, enforcement, emergency response. We really need to drive these crash numbers down. We need to come at it from different angles. So educating drivers about bicyclist and pedestrian and vice versa. Yes, sir?
Yeah, one thing I could think, when people make a right turn on the red light, they need to make sure it's safe to do it, because there have been several times I've hit my brakes to keep from hitting somebody. One time I was making a left turn on the arrow, on the green arrow, and somebody made a right turn. And they made the right turn. They went into my lane, so I had to brake to keep from hitting them. And if I have the left hand signal, that means they're making the right turn on the red light. And then the woman goes, I had to turn wide. Yeah, right. Because he's pulling the bolt, but you're making.
That's actually a good point that would fall under probably two of these. Education, so that you're right. You had the left turn signal, you had the right of way. She may or may not have stopped before turning right, but she still had to yield the right of way to you, and she didn't. So that could be an education. It could be an enforcement thing, and maybe if that's happening frequently enough with the limited resources we have from the law enforcement side, maybe that's a targeted driver behavior that needs to be looked at from an enforcement standpoint. It's a good point. So education-wise, we just threw a couple of them up here again. There could be several, but in terms of getting you to participate back here, we just threw up a couple. A distracted driving campaign in high schools to try to reach that younger driver. Even though we were showing based on fatal crashes, the younger drivers aren't happening, or they're not responsible as much as statewide as we see in fatal crashes. It's still an issue, the younger driver. Maybe a safe driving campaign for that other end of the age spectrum that was heavily involved in fatal crashes. So either for the elderly and or those from out of town maybe that aren't as familiar with the roads.
Are they teaching, like in high school, the driver?
Driver's ed. As far as I know, it is not being taught in most, if not all, of the schools in Arizona. Brian, do you know? Okay, yep. So it's not a requirement as far as I know anymore. So that could be an education component. Bring back driver's ed.
Reduce accidents. If they did that, that could reduce accidents. And if people don't tax while they're driving.
The distracted and inattentive driver, yes. So from an enforcement side, we've thrown up a couple here. Maybe targeted speed enforcement where there's a speed-related crash problem. We've thrown up school areas here, but it could be a particular stretch of, say, McCulloch or Acoma, where there may be a crash problem related to speeding. Maybe targeted alcohol and drug impairment checkpoints, and I'm guessing that local city police is already doing some of that, but that could be an enforcement strategy. Yes, please, into the mic.
Red light cameras, because we had an intersection in Missouri. It was horrible. Crash after crash. They put the cameras in there, reduced the accident rate by about 75% because no one wanted to get it, or people got tickets after the fact, and then they were more careful at that intersection.
So photo enforcement specifically for red light running, and it has been shown to be effective when set up properly. You're exactly right. You can also do photo enforcement for speeding. So from an engineering standpoint, we've thrown up a few things here that you can choose from. Bike lanes, and those could be protected or not. We're showing listing protected bike lanes up here. Enhanced pedestrian crossings. And there are some pretty nice pedestrian crossings in town already with median refuge islands. This could get into things like hawks, if anybody's familiar with what Tucson has done a lot of. They're called pedestrian hybrid beacons, usually at mid-block crossings. Pedestrian goes up, pushes the button, the signal, which was dark, automatically starts flashing yellow and then flashing red, and then it goes to red and stops traffic while the pedestrians cross. Additional sidewalks were needed to make it easier and safer for pedestrians to walk. Safe routes to school assessments, if there are issues with traffic safety and school kids walking and biking to school. Signal timing and coordination we did here when we were over here a few weeks ago, and we're seeing on our online survey some issues with some of the closely spaced signals like Mulberry and 95, where you can see the signal just behind the one that you're supposed to be paying attention to, and it can create confusion. And at intersections where you've got driveways right on top of the intersection. This can create left turn crash issues, rear end crash issues. Emergency response, and I'm not sure if you have these at all of the signals or any of the signals in town, but the signal preemption that gives the green light to the fire truck or the ambulance or the police vehicle as they're going through the intersection. Fire hazard. It's nice when all emergency responders can have that and not just fire. They didn't want to play nicely. Again, those are just examples. And a few of you have come up with some additional strategies. Other strategies that anybody wants to share before we get into the playful part of this exercise? Things that, and obviously this isn't an all-inclusive list. We'll be coming up with additional strategies as we look at the crash data in more detail.
Having the state pass legislation to eliminate cell phone use while driving, like in most other states.
So legislation banning the use of cell phones, talking and or texting, I assume, while driving, or while walking maybe, or while biking. Other strategies. One second.
Just something for cyclists only, but where there's room on the roads for cyclists to ride, keeping the debris off the road, keeping them clean, basically keeps the cyclist off to the side a little bit. If there's debris, cyclists will pull out more onto where the motor vehicle traffic is. So keeping the roads clean is definitely helpful for cyclists specifically.
Teresa, you're capturing all this.
Did you cover timed lights? In other words, keeping the traffic moving at the same rates?
I think that kind of falls in, let me see how I worded it. Adjust traffic signal timing and coordination. Yes. But that's a good point. A lot of people don't think of that as a safety strategy, but it is. I mean, it's more from an operational standpoint, but it does impact safety. Other strategies.
Motorcyclists or bicycles wearing helmets.
Helmets for our vulnerable road users, motorcyclists and bicyclists. Again, not a state law or, yes, good point. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa, and she's going to explain what you guys are going to do with the gold doubloons.
Yeah, you're going to get some gold coins. So Ashley and Albert are going to come around and give everybody 4 coins. And what we want you to think about is this question. Of the strategies that we talked about that work in other places, not all of them work in all the places. Think about the 11 strategies and which are the 4 that you think would work the best in Lake Havasu. So consider some of the crash data you saw, of especially the fatalities, what's causing those. What are you thinking of the different strategies that will help reduce the crashes? And so when we finish, we have red solo cups, 1 for each of the strategies, and you can put your coin in 4 different strategies, 1 coin per strategy. And if you feel really passionate about something and want to put 4 coins in 1 strategy, okay, we'll let you do that. So we want you to go ahead and spend your coins when we're finished with the presentation. So that's one of the things that we want to do. But before we finish, we want to cover a couple things. We have a lot of activities for you to do here today. We have an online survey. And if you have not participated online, we have a hard copy over here on the table that you can fill out. Real fast survey to complete. And then we have a mailbox for you to return that in over here on the table. Sergeant Burns and Lewis is here with some impaired goggles. And you can put on these goggles, and then they're going to do a field sobriety test on you so you can see what it's like to drive impaired. And of course, you're going to spend your gold coins. If you have additional strategies, we took some here, but if you have additional things that you're willing to do or you think others should do to make the streets safer, add those to our graffiti wall, if you would. And then make sure you've signed in and done a meeting evaluation before you leave. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jean to kind of talk about the next steps with the study and what we're going to do after this meeting.
I have no idea. Actually, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to do is a lot of you, it's hard to, I've gotten feedback that the link is hard to find to put in all the right dashes and whatnot. www.lhmpo.org on my business card. If you go to the website, right on the front page, it says survey. It talks about the safety plan and survey, and if you click on it, it takes you right to the survey as well as the map that's included. So greatly would appreciate you doing that. The information is extremely valuable. As of last night, we had 170, and we've had it up less than 2 weeks, so that's really good feedback, but we want more. We want to hear from you. We want your ideas, your concerns. It's really important. Mike and I haven't really talked quite yet about what our next step is. I know he's still gathering data, and I'll let him talk about that. But again, I want to thank all of you for taking time to come out today.
Actually, the next steps include developing and reaching consensus with the Technical Advisory Committee, the MPO's Technical Advisory Committee, on what the regional safety vision should be. And typically the vision is what we were showing there on the video that Nevada does and what Arizona did and some of the other regional safety plans. It usually has something to do with 0 fatalities, 0 injuries, 0 fatalities. And most people think that that's kind of pie in the sky, but I think here with a regional plan that's really concentrating on pretty much just one city, I think that's doable. You're averaging 3 fatal crashes a year. Why can't we get rid of 3 fatal crashes a year? So we need to settle on the vision. It's probably going to be 0 fatalities, and then the goals, how to get to that vision. So if our vision is to get to 0 fatalities over the next 10 years, percentage-wise, what would that be? If we need to come down 10% a year over 10 years, that would be 100%. That's typically a goal. We will dive deeper into the crash data, like Jean said, coming up with emphasis areas similar to some of those we showed when we were comparing it to the state. So maybe older drivers is an emphasis area, pedestrians, bicyclists, maybe the younger driver, maybe intersection crashes. We'll be developing those emphasis areas. Once we have finalized the emphasis areas, these strategies, some of these strategies we talked about, additional strategies, will be developed to address those emphasis areas, to bring those crash numbers down. Eventually, at the end of the safety plan, we will be coming up with a list of locations, priority locations, whether it's intersections or segments or corridors. Maybe it's all of McCulloch or all of Acoma or certain portion of Acoma, that we want to pursue funding for actual projects, whether those projects are to provide bike lanes or sidewalks or additional resources for law enforcement to do what they do out there from a traffic safety standpoint. But we will be developing projects and benefit cost ratios to help support getting federal safety funds to address safety in the region.
I would be remiss in not doing this, and so please forgive me for taking a minute to do this. But I did want to thank our council member Don Callahan for attending, and our city manager Charlie Cassens. And I also have 3 members of my technical advisory committee. I've got Stephen Latosky with Mojave County. Yes, we include them in our planning because that's what we do. Rich Wells also with Lake Havasu City, and Stuart Smelling with Lake Havasu City. So I just want to thank you for your participation also. And I know how busy Charlie and Don are, so thank you very much for coming. So forgive me for missing that.
And traffic engineers usually think that we can solve all of the safety problems, and that's definitely not the case. But I really appreciate law enforcement participating, and really I always think they are a critical stakeholder in any of these safety plans, getting their support. They know where most, if not all, of the traffic safety issues and problem locations are, so we definitely need to keep them involved, and I'm glad they're here.
And I have to say that because I've worked with Sergeant Burns since he took this new position. He's going, God, that woman over at the MPO is going to drive me nuts. But he has been so accommodating and so helpful. And he also takes all these, we've given him numerous of these maps and shares the information. So he's like me. It's not something we completely stick on a shelf, because this report will not go on a shelf. I will drive you all crazy with it. But Sergeant Burns has put a lot of time into this, and I really want to thank you for that effort.
Okay, so you can, that kind of concludes the presentation. You can come back and look at the maps. You can spend your gold coins. You can write on the wall. You can do the survey. You can do the field sobriety test. And then we're going to repeat this presentation every time we get a crowd tonight. And we're going to be here till 5:30 or until we don't have anybody in the room. So if you have other people that you think that might be interested, go give them a call and tell them to come on down. Thanks.